Greetings, Wastelanders! Thanks for tuning in to another Gaslands NorCal instructional video. In this episode, we're going to be covering decals. 3 different varieties, in fact. We're going to be using some water slide decals. We're also going to be using some dry rub decals. And lastly, we're going to be using some nail art. The builds we're going to be using for today's decals are this 1970 Toyota Celica, a Land Rover Series 3 pickup, and a 1970s van. Now, the paint that I used on these miniatures comes from Huge Miniatures. They're Iron, Regal Purple, and Starfire Yellow. The decals I'll be using today are from AK Interactive, Thomas Wynn Studios, Fallout Hobbies, Woodland Scenics, and Crane Shop for the nail art. As with everything, it's important to have the right tool for the job, so I'll be using a pair of medical grade tweezers to lift off the water slide decals and get them placed and put in place. After the decals have stuck and dried, I'll be coating them with the Citadel Color Technical Water Shield to hold them in place. As with everything, I will stick a link to the products I'm using in the description. Before we jump into the video, please punch that like button if you like what you see, and if you'd be so kind as to hit the subscribe button as well, I would be greatly appreciative. There are going to be a few cuts in this video as I wait for things to dry, so please stick with me. See what I did there? Alright, first off, we are going to be doing some water slide decals. Now with the water slide decals, there's some different decals that come, like these ones from AK Interactive. You'll see when I pull them out of the water, the decal goes around the actual decal, how it comes off. Some of the other ones you have to finely cut around the edges because they don't go along the edges of the decal, which some are better than others. I found that the ones from Fallout Hobbies work really well, and you can't really see the edges, so those are the ones I'm going to be sticking with. The nail art, my wife found these at Goodwill, and this is nail art that was from like Halloween that ladies would use, or whoever would use, and I've trimmed them up so I just get the portion that I want, so I'm just going to be getting that skull. These work really well, don't require any, obviously, water or anything to get them on there, but it is important that when you're putting them on there, you get them exactly where you want them because they are pretty sticky. So let's start off with the Celica. I really like this purple. We're going to try something new. I'm going to get the initial water slide decal on there, and then I'm going to stick another one over top of it as the banner. So we'll see how that turns out. So we're going to let that water slide soak for a while, and then we'll pull it out and get it on the build. Okay, it's been soaking in there a while. Let's see if we can get it to come off. Don't want to leave them too long or they will already separate from the paper and it makes them a lot harder to get off. This one looks like it's just about perfect. So yeah, see, it just comes right off of there. Got to be careful with your tweezers so you're not tearing the decal. If you do, you can just chip it up and make it look like it was meant to be that way. Gonna get it on there. And I always like to make sure my decals are going to stand out. Try not to use a black decal in a black car or a white decal in a white car, obviously. There we go. Not too bad. Like I said, I really like how that stands out. The next we're gonna do while that one dries is the nail art. I want to get this nail art on the hood of the Land Rover. And luckily, it's already kind of started to peel away. Makes it easier to peel off. Toss the backing. Like I said, really want to make sure that it's exactly where you want it before you get it stuck down there. There you go. That's it for the nail art. Aside from kind of edging around it and maybe adding some chipping and stuff, the But the only thing with nail art is it is difficult to find nail art that's really going to work out well with a Gaslands or Wastelands build. Halloween's probably the best time to do it. Depending on what you're looking for, there's like flames and stuff out there. I always like the nail art that's very, very flat. There's other nail art that's more raised. Don't really like that because it's too obviously nail art on the build. But that's it for that one. Really like that. Really like how it turns out. It's just a skull. Don't have to worry about all the little gems or anything, so just make sure you trim it up. Other than that, that one's all good. And the next step for this one would be adding some chipping and rust and weathering and whatnot. Wheels, weapons, armor. That's another video. The next one we're going to be doing is these water slide decals. Now this one, the clear portion of it is also going to come off with the decal, but what I really like about the Fallout Hobby ones is you can barely see it after you get it painted up and after you add the Storm Shield coat on there, so it doesn't look like it's obviously a decal. So let's drop this one in the water and we'll let that soak for a while, and then we'll get it on the build. Okay, another thing that I really like about the Fallout Hobbies water slide decals is you don't really have to let them soak that long. Some of the other ones, they have to soak for a while to get them separated. These ones, not really at all. See, that comes right off. They're really pretty. Be careful that you don't have any wind or air blowing in the background. Having these fold up on you is a pain. So since this one has like the paint rolling down, we're going to get it right to the edge of the build on that. Press it down. And you can kind of see a little bit of the edge around that decal. Like I said, after I add the Storm Shield coat and add some more weathering, you won't be able to see that at all. And look how well that stands out. With this color and the color of the decals, the lettering, you couldn't really see when it was just on the paper, pops out really well. Awesome, love that one. Let's see how we're doing on this one. Starting to dry. You don't want to start shifting them around too early because then you'll shift it around and then it's just a real pain. One of the things I will do if I get a decal on a build that I don't like the positioning of it, and we'll move this one around just for the demonstration purpose of it. Get a Q-tip, get some water on there, and then just kind of drop it around there, and that will allow you to kind of shift around where the decal's at if you don't like the positioning of it. Be careful when you're doing it. Don't press too hard or too fast, or it will get way out of place like that one just did. So I'll get that one back into place in a bit using that same method, or I'll do it just now. And you just soak up the excess water with the other end of the Q-tip that you didn't wet down. And there we go, back to where we started. Alright, now on to the dry rub transfer decals. Now, one of the things to keep in mind with these decals is the ones that I'm using specifically, these were made for Pinewood Derby. So it's not really the right medium that you're transferring these decals onto. So it does take a little finesse and a little practice. I used several different methods trying to get it just right or try to get it where it would stay. Sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. There are a bunch of different decals out there, different brands, and some of them work better than others. I found some that absolutely do not work at all on Hot Wheels or die-cast. Some of them work a lot better. The ones from Woodland Scenic probably are my favorite, and they work the best. And you can see how well that's going to pop on that color. And it is just like it says, dry rub. So I just use my fingers, press really, really hard to get it initially down there. And that you can see it's already kind of sticking on there. And then I'll use my fingernail and press really hard on there. not so hard you're going to hurt yourself, but do it at your own degree of pain tolerance, I suppose. And then just kind of slowly lift off the edges to make sure everything was on there. You see just a tiny bit didn't come off the plastic part, but that's okay. We can add some chipping or something on there, but see? And that's as easy as that. Still going to add the technical coat on this one to help it stick. I'm not really going to add the technical coat on the nail art because it doesn't really need it, but I will add it on the other ones. So that one we're not obviously don't have to let dry. We're going to let this side dry before we add the technical storm shield on there. So we'll just set this one aside for now, and we'll get some of the other ones on in a bit. The next thing I want to kind of try, and I don't like where that's positioned, so let's shift that around a little bit more. One thing you have to keep in mind when doing this, though, is the kind of paint you have underneath. Don't use too much water or some of the paint will start to come off. I am going to see if I can get one of these smaller ones over the top of it like a banner and see how well that comes out. So let's get these smaller ones into the water. Let that soak for a while. And again, these ones are from Fallout Hobbies, so they don't have to soak that much. The smaller the paper size, the less time you have to soak them in. So just let that sit for a few seconds. Let's see if we can get that one to come off easily enough. And after I let it soak, I always kind of dab it on a napkin to get the excess water off of there. Yeah, and that comes off just fine. A lot smaller size decal, so you really have to be careful when maneuvering them around. Yeah, and that's kind of how I want that one. And you just kind of shift it around a little bit. Be careful with the decals, you don't want to tear them. Look at that. No piece. These ones you really do have to make sure they dry completely before you add the storm shield on there. Otherwise, applying the storm shield will shift the decal all around. You don't want that. So I'm going to let those dry, and then we'll get on to the application of the storm shield. Okay, I've got the rest of my water slide decals placed on here. Turned out pretty good. One of the things that I didn't go over because I wasn't really on an edge is making sure you get the water slides down in the creases. You do that just gently, like if you have a fingernail. Up here, I just used a toothpick and lightly pushed it down in the edges or in the creases to make sure it's all the way in there. Keep in mind that is going to move it as the part of it, the decal is going to go down into the groove. So the last step we're going to do is the storm shield. And I apply that just to make sure if I'm adding any other weathering or any other paints or anything, that's not going to move around my decals. I like to use a larger brush, very, very soft. And you don't need to get a whole lot on your brush, just a tiny bit, because you're only going to add a light coat on there. And make sure you kind of go over the whole thing, nice, even, so there's no lines or paint ridges. And make sure you let that dry before you do any other weathering, because the paint ridges and whatnot will definitely show up. You just need a very light touch on there, just in case any of your decals have not completely dried, so they're not shifting around at all. Just going to go over all decals with this. And this is going to, just as it says, has a really, really good shield on it, and make sure it doesn't move around, and make sure if it gets bumped or anything with the rest of the modifications, it's not going to mess up your decal. And like I said, it does not have to go over the nail art, because that's going to stick pretty much forever unless you really, really, really try your hardest to get it off of there. And then that is going to be that. Decals, I think, can add a lot of character and a lot of really cool effect to your build. There'll be a lot of times that I'll start off with a base coat and not really know where the build is going. until I add some decals, and then I just kind of know that's what I want it to look like. That's where I want it to be at. Let that dry, and then you can continue on with weathering, adding wheels, weapons, armor, everything else. Like I said, that's another video. But once again, if you like what you see, hit that like button. If you could do me a favor and hit the subscribe, I would appreciate it. Other than that, sticking on there nice and good. Gaslands NorCal, signing off.